I was there on the aftermath of Black Monday in November 1987. And as a young trader, you never want to lose money. But I have to admit, back, almost 40 years ago, I think I lost over 10 million US dollars that day. Wow. I was a naive young trader at that time. One of the most important things now is really learning how to network, how to meet people, right? And how to leverage on resources. And that's something that you don't learn in school, you don't really learn at home. So just talk to as many people as you can. I mean, you have to have, in English, thick skin, hoki. And you really need to be able to learn to take rejection. Yeah, networking is important, but it's really picking up the pieces when you do get rejected, and for you to understand that, and then again for you to adapt and continue to move on. And everybody, even the most successful people have gone through downturns in their life. And I think people don't understand that. People say, oh, they've always had a successful career. That's not true. If you really got to understand that person, everybody has had setbacks. And it's really, how did that individual rebound from that setback?
Leland, thank you so much for coming to Hero Talk, a mini series by Wong's Vibe, collaborating with Finance 730. It's really my honor and pleasure to have you here today. Renowned guests like yourself, CEO of Pan Asian mortgage company. First, we have a tradition in Wong's Vibe. It's to answer questions from previous guests. So the question is actually from Andy, who just completed a 270 miles ultramarathon at 61 years old. So his question to you is, what is true leadership in your view?
I think true leadership, well, first, before I start, so thanks very much for having me on this program. I've seen several of the recent programs you have, and they're all very interesting guests that you have, and across a myriad of topics. So again, thanks very much for having me. But to answer your question, or answer Andy's question, I think leadership is someone who can exude confidence and bring trust in people without just because of his or her title, okay? Or even their experience, all right? Someone who, as you can say, can inspire people by doing things that they recognize as someone who, as I say, again, instills that trust and I hate to use the word again, leadership, but the ability to take charge and allow people to be the best that they can be.
Okay, great. I think that's a great answer. So I think take us back. I think we will take us back, back to Pan Asian, your company that you founded. What was your ordinary world back then, before you found this company, like the job, the mindset, the status quo?
I think before I set up the company, I worked for a couple of investment banks, and I also helped the government set up the Hong Kong Mortgage Corporation. And I think for me, coming out of school, I needed that foundation, that training, that background to really make myself become an entrepreneur. On rare occasions, I've seen some business school classmates of mine come out of business school and really have an idea and become very successful entrepreneurs. But I think those are few and far between. I think the entrepreneurs I've seen are people who have been in industry and now are doing fantastically well. And I think the reason is, and I'll speak for myself, is that having spent 10 years working for two Wall Street firms, it gave me that grounding, as I said, that foundation, not just so much the knowledge, but things that you really can't learn. For example, I tell a lot of young people, one of the most important things now is really learning how to network, how to meet people, right? And how to leverage on resources. And that's something that you don't learn in school, you don't really learn at home. And it's really, you learn kind of, on the job, so to speak. So having that decade under my belt, I think really helped me to, where things are today.
Do you think with the age of AI, the networking skill, of the youngsters is gonna, decrease because they just get used to talk to the machine instead of, human?
I think so, at least the way I see AI developing right now, and even before AI, just in terms of social media and, with, all these iPhones and whatnot, there is a lot less socialization or at least face to face. In my own company, I tell my team I really encourage them not to have Zoom or team meetings. Okay, especially if you're in the same town. All right, go and meet that person. That face to face interaction is very, very important.
So back in the days, who were your first mentors or like unlikely allies that gave you wisdom, capital, or credibility when you had none?
Yeah, I think if I look back, I think probably my first mentors were definitely in school. All right, I go back as far as even my high school. Whether it's an assistant principal or one of my teachers, and I recently look back because as I'm getting up in my age, some of my mentors, unfortunately, have recently passed. And when they pass, I really reflect on the time that I spent with them and the things that they taught me. So again, these were my early mentors. And then I would say my next group of mentors really were my formative years when I was at Goldman Sachs. And again, Wall Street was very different than it is today. And back then, there was a lot more people interaction, all right? And in some ways, while, Wall Street's the epitome of, I hate to say, greed and making money, but I think back then, in the days I started in the 1980s, Wall Street, still cared about your client and cared about customer relationships. And I hope that with the advent of technology and AI, those type of those soft skills or that touchy-feely things really don't go away, because at the end of the day, we're still all human beings, and that interaction, I think, is still paramount and very important.
So one of my favorite book is Joseph Campbell's The Hero with 1,000 Faces, and there's often a talisman. So was there like a tool or technology or maybe a unique loan product that became your secret weapon at the Pan Asian?
Well, I have to say if it was a talisman, it was really, I think, my understanding and what I've learned from, particularly in the United States, in terms of some of the what we call structured finance or securitization technology, which I then adapted to local Hong Kong market opportunities. I think Hong Kong or Asia in general was not as advanced. This was back in the 90s and early 2000s in terms of that. And I basically tried to take something that I had learned and applied it to local market technology. I didn't necessarily reinvent the wheel. I just adapted this to a local market situation.
Understood. That's great. And can you tell us more about what was the single hardest test that Pan Asian faced back then? Or maybe when you started or during?
Definitely. Well, the Pan Asian started in 2002. And we were helping, our first product was to help people that were what was called in English negative equity, in Chinese, 还负资产.
Yes.
And these are unfortunately homeowners who had bought properties in the mid-90s. And then unfortunately, because of the Asian financial crisis, property values fell significantly by more than 50% over about a 6-year period. So we try to help these borrowers in terms of trying to reduce their monthly payments. We couldn't do anything about property prices, but at least we could at least try to reduce their debt burden. And then when we started in 2002, everything went very well. And then for some of you who are still old enough to remember, in 2003, Hong Kong was gripped with SARS. And that was probably a very kind of scary time for us. No one visited Hong Kong. And again, in some ways, we had just recently lived through COVID. This was really the precursor to that. So property prices continue to go down. But I think we had confidence in Hong Kong people that if they have the ability to pay on their mortgage, they continue to pay. And I think we were proven correct. So, Hong Kong people are generally very good in honoring their debt. And so I think we came out of it unscathed. And it just shows, I think, the resilience of Hong Kong people through an incident, SARS, which was really unknown to anyone at that time.
I think the city always bounced back in a very resilient way. Doesn't matter like what sort of format, different format every time. Like you have SARS, you have financial crisis, Asia financial crisis, and you have COVID. So every time the city just bouncing back. And I think now we're in the bouncing back period post COVID.
Yes,
if you agree, yeah,
definitely.
So were you facing some competition back then, your company?
Yeah, I think every business, has competition. So, we definitely face competition, within the private sector, with quasi-government entities.
Yeah.
And I think it's the competition, I think just makes us better. As I said, the company was set up based on adaptation from the United States. You adapt.
Yeah.
And I think nowadays, whatever industry you're in or whatever company you have to learn to adapt. And especially now with technology, everyone is trying to adapt, trying to embrace technology. And the only thing I would say about that is I think technology is great. You hear a lot about different, let's say in my industry, FinTech. But I've seen, unfortunately, a lot of great companies with great ideas that they have the technology, but possibly they didn't really truly understand the fin side or the finance side. So it's still the fundamental way to do a particular business, whether it be banking or securities or insurance or big data or whatever. I think for the successful ones, they kind of understand the basic foundation, the bricks and mortar of whatever that business is. And the ones who weren't successful, I think, just focused too much on their technology.
So take us to your dark night of the soul. What was the darkest time you've been through, personally, professionally? What kept you from walking away? How did you handle extreme difficult situation?
I think, Hong Kong, in the last, in the 25 years that we've been in business, we've had several ups and downs. Most of them are, not in our control. As I mentioned, 2003 was SARS.
Yeah.
That was a pretty scary time, albeit it was very short, about 3 or 4 months. And then in 2008, the global financial crisis, it hit us very badly at Pan Asian because it emanated from the United States. It had to deal with mortgages, and the word mortgage for a long time was not a very a popular word to be used with subprime mortgages, and everyone thought we were doing subprime lending. And then again, I think during COVID, things really quieted down. So I think through that 25-year period, those are probably the 3 significant downturns. And I always think a company who is truly resilient, which really can adapt and get through those severe downturns, will generally be successful in the long run.
How did you handle stress back then? If you can tell us a little bit more, like your inner way of dealing.
I see. Well, I think I'm probably not a great example of how one handles stress. I think I've always internalized stress, all right? And that's probably not the best way. I know, a lot of my friends, they play a sport, they work out, they do different things to kind of release that stress. But I have a kind of a unique way to internalize that stress. No, but I still, I play golf, and I also play poker, and so there are things that I do, and people say, "Wow, you play poker? That's stressful in itself." But for me, it's a way that I can use that to de-stress and not have to think about work.
Okay, so talk about internalization. So you don't really recycle; you just keep it to you, or you just wait for it to disappear, or?
Okay, that's a good question. I think when I say I internalize, is as an only child, I've always grown up where when I've had a challenge or a misfortune or something has happened, I internalize and I try to kind of figure out, well, what went wrong? What happened? What could I have done differently? And I guess that's, for myself, that served me well. I didn't have any brothers and sisters that I can go to, and sure, I have friends, but I tend to, again, maybe as an only child syndrome, learned how to internalize and try to kind of talk to myself, and then try to pick myself up after that.
So you've always conquered your stress internally. You don't need to use any outside sources or have.
Generally not. Yeah, I think I've always been kind of a person who kind of hopefully, number one, learns from my mistakes. I think that's the most important thing. But a lot of people don't admit that they've made mistakes, and therefore it's very difficult for them to learn. So I think by internalizing, while it may not be good physically, but I think for me mentally, by internalizing it, I kind of I kind of admit my own shortcomings, okay, my weaknesses. And I think if one does that, one then can improve from that.
Were your wife and family supportive of you that you started your new company back then?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you need a very supportive network, okay, of friends, family. And so, as an entrepreneur, although I worked long hours when I worked on Wall Street, I think the pressures of, having your own business, now being responsible for, tens, 50, 60, 70, 80 different families, I think it's a different pressure. And so, there's no set work hours. I work weekends, I work holidays, and I work through the night. Even when I'm on vacation, I'm still reachable, and my staff knows that.
So what was their first clear reward? Not just money, but like a moment of like community impact or fulfillment?
I have to say, I think, when we launched the first, our first program, which was to help negative equity homeowners, I really thought, or people came to me, maybe I didn't think myself, that hopefully we were doing something good, for the community, right? These were homeowners, again, not investors, but truly homeowners who bought property in the early 90s, early to mid 90s. And, no one likes to see the value of their home go down, just like your investment portfolio. No one's like to see the value of investment portfolio go down. But people were really deep underwater, and they were paying a relatively high rate of interest. So the feedback we had gotten unsolicited from a lot of the borrowers that we helped was at least they did appreciate that we were able to help reduce their debt burden, meaning that their monthly payment was going down. And then amazingly, after SARS 2003, the property market rebounded very quickly. All right, and we were very, very happy for that. So they were paying a lower rate of interest, and at the same time, their property value started going up again. So I think from a self-satisfaction, I think at least we hope that we were a small part in trying to help boost the community spirit, back during that time before SARS and then shortly after SARS.
Do you think we're going through a similar stage right now with the property price being rebounded?
Absolutely. Again, for the 5 years previously, like 2001 to 2025, property values, did fall again. Some people got into negative equity, not as bad situation as in the 2002, 2003. But again, in the last year, prices have rallied by about 10% now. So there is this, feel-good factor. Yeah. And I think not only here in Hong Kong, but if you look, across the border into China, I think that's, very, very important that whether you bought a home or you have investments, that at least hopefully, you do make some money. So I think that support the government has given over the last, 1 to 2 years to try to bolster the property market in Hong Kong has been very, very important.
Do you see this trend to continue or stop it?
No, absolutely. I think despite all the geopolitical uncertainties, I still think, the fundamental trend is upward. All right. And again, a lot of the basic economic supply and demand factors are in play here in Hong Kong. And as you said earlier, Hong Kong is extremely resilient. And the good thing about markets, and people should understand, is that markets will go down and they also will rebound. All right. But again, when markets rebound, I think people have to understand that the market could come back down again.
Yes.
So this market upward and downward movement is very, very normal. And I think people just need to understand that. Doesn't matter what markets, stock markets, gold markets, oil markets, property markets, every market has to go up and down. Because if the market only went one way, then you and I wouldn't need to have our day job.
Yeah. Right? So it's like life, right? Life is also up and down. There's no always, and it seems like you manage your downs pretty well by internalizing. That's something that I think a lot of people need to learn from you, because I think for me, when I try to manage my stress or internal things, sometimes, as you said, I need to talk to my friends. Like, it's important for men to speak out.
Yeah.
So I also have these leaning, men's circle I host with my other friend once every, month. It's 8 to 10 men. We sit together, friends, pro bono, after work. We talk about, we celebrate first our small victories, and then we share our, status. So men or not, ask to comment, but to listen. But of course, if they need advice, then we will give. So we realized that actually feeling loneliness is not, your thing or my thing. Everybody feel the same thing. It's like a common thread through the community. So I think that's very important. So
if I can say,
yeah,
I think the way that you go about it,
yeah,
where you have a network,
yeah,
all right, a group of friends, people that you trust, that you can share with, I think is a better way than the way I've been doing it. Okay, but I had to be honest with you. As I said, at a young age, I internalized, but that's probably not the best way. So again, I think what you've just said, Kevin, I think is a better way, whether it's with friends, whether
yeah,
it's with family,
yeah,
whether it's with mentors or people
yes,
you trust.
yes,
Some people, it could be, some religious person,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
or it could be a previous teacher or professor, okay,
yes, yes,
whatever it is. I think I have to agree with you. I think that's the better way.
yeah. So did you, like reconcile someone like that in your life? You talk about the father figure, like the mentor. Like, did you?
I've had a few. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I've had a few, mentors. I think in my life, and I really respect them for their opinions. All right. One, as I said, was early on. One of my high school teachers, I do recall quite well. And then in my later years, there were a few people at Goldman Sachs when I was young and still learning. I remember as a young trader, I was a bond trader. I was there on the aftermath of Black Monday in October 1987. And as a young trader, you never want to lose money. But I have to admit, back almost 40 years ago, I think I lost over $10 million that day.
Wow.
And back then, that was a lot of money. And I was still a young trader. I made several mistakes. But that person on the trading desk, took me aside and only spoke to me once and for about 10 minutes. And I can almost remember the entire 10-minute conversation of what he said. And I, to this day, recall the things I should have done. And I hope that going forward from that day, I didn't make those same mistakes.
What did he say to you, if you can share?
He basically said to me that these are the mistakes I made. I didn't put on the hedges, correctly. I didn't, talk to my other traders around me. Okay, maybe that was the downside of internalizing. And at the end of the day, Goldman Sachs back then, I think still today, still espouses kind of teamwork. And I didn't really work together as a team with the other traders around me. And again, this was probably really the naivete. I was a naive young trader at that time. And again, I think that was the most important thing that I learned from that experience is that, you're part of a team and you need to lean on your fellow traders to help you out.
I think there's no failure or mistake. There's only growth if you look at that way with that perspective. So you talk about a lot of like people connection, network, it's a people's business in your work or
Yes.
in my not work or in finances, right? So what kind of advice would you give to a 25-year-old, a youngster today? How can they just reach out from nowhere to, network or, they have nothing, like there's nothing,
Well, I wouldn't agree they have nothing. I think if they really look at it, first you start from school, okay?
Yeah.
Whether it's a high school or whether it's a college, all right? Or in Hong Kong, many young people go to VTC, vocational training. I think what I call is the alumni network, okay? Your fellow students, students who may have graduated before you, right? And it doesn't matter Hong Kong or UK or US or wherever. I think the alumni network is very, very strong, okay? It is a very good way to at least your first point of call, at least because you have something in common.
Yeah.
You both went to the same school. At my old firm, again, Goldman Sachs, one of the things that I think Goldman does very well is that it has a very strong alumni network. I can't say the same of other firms, whether it's banks or investment banks or just multinationals, but that network of alumni, I think, is really the first port of call. You have something in common with that person. So I would advise that, a young person is, start with that initially, all right? And then after that, then go to your friend network, all right? Hopefully a young person will have friends. They have friends that work in different industries, and just talk to those people. Most people would be willing to say, oh, love to have a drink with you, or can I have a drink with you? And people would generally say yes, all right? So just talk to as many people as you can. Again, in person, not over Zoom or on a conference call or what have you. So I think that face-to-face meeting is very important, even if it's for a casual catch-up over drinks.
I think it's very important, and it doesn't matter if the people you're looking for says no, because there's always someone who's gonna say yes. You just have to keep trying, keep hustling, right?
Absolutely. No, I think it's a fantastic point. I mean, you have to have in English, thick skin, hoki, and you really need to be able to learn to take rejection. I know that's something that young people don't learn. Schools normally don't teach you. They don't teach you about failure or rejection. But again, I think these two things, or how to overcome them, these aspects are very important when you're growing up. And I know that, unfortunately, a lot of young people are affected by mental health issues today. Yes. And I think, for us, who are now probably in a more mentor role, I think that's probably one of the most important things that can help young people. Yeah, networking is important, but it's really picking up the pieces when you do get rejected, when you don't get that job offer, or you might, unfortunately, get fired from a job. Yeah. Not necessarily fired, maybe you're made redundant from a. It's not that you didn't do well. Yes. It's just that the circumstance of that particular company or institution has changed, and for you to understand that, and then again for you to adapt and continue to move on. So I always tell young people, while it's important to look back, meaning at least learn from your experiences, but I'm always a look forward kind of guy. Or another example I use is that I always look at the cup as half full, not as half empty, right? And all those kind of cliches I know sound kind of maybe somewhat corny, but if you really can put those to use, then maybe those sayings aren't so corny after all.
I agree with you that not looking backward or, maybe reflecting on mistakes and failures, but if looking forward, would you feel anxious if, let's say, you're expecting many things and things doesn't come?
No, I think you always have to look forward, but always know that you will have setbacks. Okay, not everything's going to work out, right? The world is not perfect, and it's not always a yes. And I think every time you get a rejection or a no, I think you learn from that, and then hopefully you move on to the next opportunity, because there will always be a next opportunity, right? You just have to look for it. You have to work hard, and you have to be hungry. So when I've interviewed young people in the past, at universities, some of them have asked me good questions. And the best question they asked me is, well, you're interviewing 12, 15 of us today. How are you going to differentiate between us? And I say, it's actually not that, it's not a secret. I differentiate people, number one, who've done their homework, right? Who've really come prepared, okay? And number two, who are really curious. Right? Everyone can say I'm a hard worker, et cetera. But are you curious? And how have you shown me that curiosity? And I think just those two aspects, being prepared and being curious, all right, will really differentiate a young person.
So one of my podcast guests taught me this term called PHD, poor, hungry, driven. So I guess that kind of represent, you got to have that hunger to hustle through things.
Absolutely. No, I think it doesn't matter what area you're pursuing. It could be in the business world. It could be in the arts world, in the academic world. I think you really need to show that drive and that tenacity to excel. And people will see that, all right? I mean, if you always reflect on yourself, how do you, when you see other people, how do you, and you asked me, how do you see people's leadership skills or that success? And I think you'll see the people who are successful are the people who are very driven or really very hungry.
So I think usually it's the last step that you need to get to success. Like, a lot of people just give up before that last step. What do you think of, helping people or giving advice to people who needed that to, keep it on for the last step to success?
Yeah, to me, there's never a last step. I think it's an never-ending journey. I think as long as you keep up your faith and your confidence, that something will turn up positive. There will never be that last step. It's always the next step. It's not necessarily the last step.
Yeah. It's a good way of putting it. What is your definition of success then?
I've been asked this many times, and my answer has changed over the years. But now, after having worked for 40 years, I think to me, success is not about how much money you have or what position you have or how powerful you have, how much power you have. I really think it's about your ability to really balance the old, short, life-work balance. But, that seems so cliche-ish, but I think so few people do it well. I know many successful people who unfortunately have been successful in their professional life, but have not been as successful in their personal life. And I think you can see it, again, across many different industries. So again, not just the work when I say life, but also one's health, right? That, people have worked themselves to a situation where they've got health issues. And again, a lot of people don't take stress well. So again, success to me, again, is someone who can balance all these things. Maybe it's, the unachievable, but again, I think it's something that they don't really teach you in school. And that's something that each person has to determine themselves how to best balance it.
Yeah, I think also embracing imperfection is actually, life is imperfect. It's not perfect. So we have to embrace it. And as you said, I think health first. Right. Without health, you have one problem, which is your health. Right. With health, you can have 1,000 problems. And talking about balance, do you think, what comes first? Is it mental balance, physical balance, or, work and family? How did you balance your work and family at your stage right now?
Yeah. Well, to answer your first part of the question, I think the physical health, I think mental health work hand in hand. Okay. Again, I guess I've been much more attuned to mental health, particularly coming out of COVID, right? Because we were all kind of isolated, right? I mean, I think everyone's known a little bit about mental health and mental disorder, for a while here, but I think it just really came to light, particularly post-COVID. But for myself, I think, I balance it as best I can. And I think being now an entrepreneur, it's even more challenging because, you kind of dictate your own schedule, all right? I could take off, more if I wanted to, right? But then I also feel that I have kind of other responsibilities. So again, in some ways, it's even more challenging now that really to manage that time. So if you're asking me, what's the biggest challenge? And again, it's the age-old, time management, right? Even now, after working for 40 years, I'm still not an expert in it, right? I'm still trying to juggle too many things in a day, and probably my greatest weakness is I say yes too often. So
you're a yes man.
I'm a yes man because can't say no if someone wants to meet me or whatever. So, my schedule is usually pretty packed during the day. And, and my assistant always says, well, maybe, you can say no once in a while. And I says, I have a hard time saying no.
Well, thank you for, being so kind, especially to, the young people. You told me last time we had coffee, you're a mentor to many mentees, right? And do you think that as an entrepreneur, how important is discipline when you're talking about you have so many things to juggle, right?
I can tell you discipline is paramount. And even at my age, no one has the right formula for discipline. Everyone kind of gets off the beaten track on discipline. But yeah, if one is very disciplined, and simple things like getting enough rest, getting enough sleep, getting enough exercise, even eating well, what you eat, that discipline before you even get to the professional side, just your personal discipline in those three aspects. I have to say, it's still a work in progress. All right. So you definitely, Kevin, have hit on all the key topics. Discipline is definitely another thing that I tell a lot of mentees that it's a work in progress.
To me, I think I've learned that discipline is not being 100% monk mode, but it's like sometimes you can just give in and surrender. Like I take cold shower every morning, but I just skip one day because I just don't feel well. But I think discipline is to get back to it. I haven't been drinking for half a year for a long time, but then if there's my parents' birthday, I would share a glass. But then to celebrate, I don't drink for pleasure, but I drink to celebrate something, right? And then I'll get back to it sober again. So I think discipline is about able to control that. It's okay just to take a day off or whatever, but then you have to go back to
absolutely. Yes.
It's not being very extremism,
That's right.
100% monk mode. So, so Leland, you've built something lasting, right? Your company. Like, what is the elixir that you're now bringing back to the young entrepreneurs? What are you giving? Understand you mentor a lot of people. Is there anything that your purpose right now? You have accomplished so much.
Well, I think we've still yet a lot to accomplish, but I think, for the young people, whether within the company or outside that I speak to, I tell them that don't be afraid to try. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. You learn more from your mistakes than your successes. You learn more from your failures than your successes. And I think, again, that saying really holds true. I think a lot of young people are afraid to fail, okay? And again, I understand that. It's like going up on a roller coaster and you're afraid when the next fall is. But again, that's just part of life here. And then I guess for me, I would also say, don't be afraid to take risks, right? Calculated risks, okay? Obviously not, unreasonable risks, but take calculated risks, okay? And again, taking risks is part of living, right? Whether it's personally, but on the professional side, I think, again, the more successful entrepreneurs have taken risks, have gone into areas where they have a vision, they see things before other people do, and that's a bit of risk-taking. So I know a lot of people in this city are generally very risk-averse, and I understand that.
Yeah.
But again, for I think young people, while you're still young, you have a chance to take those risks, and if you don't succeed, you still have time that you can then try something else and then take more risks. All right, so I think risk-taking, in my mind, at least the background that I come from, I view it as a positive attribute.
So you started your company at 35?
A little bit older, I think.
Okay. So it's never too late, I guess.
No, I think it's never too late. I mean, I know even older people who have set up their own businesses at a later age. There is no right age, I would say. I think, as I said, for myself, I don't think I could have set up my company when I was in my 20s, all right? But I do know some of my business school alumni friends who have set up, they went out on their own right after B school and have become very, very successful. So again, it's generally not for everyone. Again, for me, the formula was to really have a decade or so under my belt of working for a large institution, understanding how things work, all the different attributes. Again, before.
Excuse me. So did you always know that you're going to be an entrepreneur back then? No.
Definitely not. My father did give me some advice when I was young, and he said, eventually, if you do find the opportunity to become an entrepreneur, because he did. He was a chemical engineer, and then he broke off and started his own company. So he in his latter part of his professional life, he was an entrepreneur. But I didn't envisage when I was going through school or college that I ever would be an entrepreneur. And some of these things kind of fall into your lap, or because of circumstances. An opportunity arises and you grab it. So so in my case, an opportunity arose, and that's what happened.
Okay, I see. So what is your purpose of life right now at your stage? Given you have your own business, your family, all well. What are you doing to give back, for example?
Yeah, I that's a very good question at this stage in life. I think, at this stage in life, as I said, I feel I have a responsibility to the young men and women that work on my team. And I think it's very important. Many of my staff joined when they were coming out of school. They were single. I've seen them get married, and now they have a family. All right. So, we are trying to help increase the birth rates in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, on the professional side. Personally, I've got 2 boys. They're now one is still in college. The other is just started working, and I feel like I'm not the kind of father who basically said, okay, you're 21 years old. That's it. You're out the door. I continue to try to nurture them, try to guide them. Although I tell them I may not be the best person because the world and is very different now. Even just from 5 years ago. And I'm not talking about the geopolitical stuff, but really in terms of technology, in terms of how technology is affecting career paths. And again, maybe for 50 years before me, things were pretty, consistent. You go to college, you get a good job, and, you advance within your company and so forth. But I think, going forward for the next 50 years, I think things will be very different. It's not just the way that one has been taught in college how to, as you said, to become successful. I think now you really need to understand where the world is going. And I think a lot of it, again, is dominated and driven by technology.
What is unfinished? The next mountain that you're still climbing?
Next mountain I'm still climbing. I think, for me right now is really how to, not just for the company, but how to kind of pass on what I've learned to kind of future generations. All right. And again, I'm not a book writer. All right. People say, oh, you should write a book. But I appreciate this opportunity to at least share some of it. But again, I think it's a time for me to reflect on, how do I pass on, what I've learned, okay, to the next generation. And I think to me, that's pretty important. I've always liked working with young people. Some people have said, oh, maybe when you retire, you can go do some teaching, right? And I might do that. I've done a little bit over
what subject you would teach?
Well, I've always been, kind of STEM focused. So, it could be business and finance, but, I wouldn't mind teaching kind of math. But I think some of the subjects which I never studied extensively, which I think are even more important nowadays. And I tell young people this, are some of the liberal arts studies. For example, psychology, understanding yourself, okay? Or sociology, understanding society, okay? And also history, and and I think those type of topics, I'm not very good at teaching it, but I do see the value in learning about those. And again, I think as you were saying early on, with the advent of technology, how do you not lose that those interpersonal skills? How do you not lose your soul? Because all those, again, soft skills, such as how do you teach someone morals, ethics, all right, personality, temperament, how do you accept failure, rebound from failure and rejection? These type of things are probably areas that, I think after having worked 40 years, I probably could offer at least a little bit of advice into those areas.
Yeah, I think you will teach well from your experience, from managing the team, rock bottom rebound, and I think that's what's very essential these days to the city, because I think a lot of people that they hit rock bottom, they couldn't know how to rebound. They just hit L.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people are depressed. Okay, they lost their job or they see their business failed. All right. But again, I've also seen people who have failed in one thing and then rebounded and become successful in others. So I think, those type of individuals, their story should be told. And, everybody, even the most successful people have gone through downturns in their life. And I think people don't understand that. People say, oh, they've always had a successful career. That's not true. If you really got to understand that person, everybody has had setbacks. And it's really how did that individual rebound from that setback.
So I think it's called a lot of compounding, that you do things, small things every day that help you improve or progress. And in 30 days, in 60 days, in 90 days, it all compound. And then you get to a stage, the next stage. that get you out from the rock bottom?
Absolutely, and most importantly, and I think the way you get from out of rock bottom, again, sorry to say, it's not from technology. I really think, as you were saying, it's really talking to people, talking to your mentors, talking to your friends and family, and again, in some ways, we've got to get back to a little bit more of that, less reliance in that regard on technology. Technology has fantastic uses and advantages, but I think at the end of the day, at least for right now, at least in my lifetime, I think nothing can replace that human touch, that understanding, that empathy, all right, to try to help someone who may be on a down path.
I really admire your purpose of life, which is to give back and pass the torch to the younger generation, because we all come in with nothing, like this computer, this glass, we all cannot take away, and it's a vessel, right? We're reading a vessel, and every my last episode, I talked to my guests and say, "Oh, I said, Kevin, why you're so negative? Talking about death." I say, death is something we should talk about and look at it every day, and not every day, but once in a while, because we all gonna go. There's no, this is a sooner or later. Yep. But it's not a negative view to look at it. It's like, given this limited time frame, what's our passion? What's our purpose? I found my purpose, which is to help people bounce back from rock bottom through different ways. This channel, my men's circle, mentoring like you. So I think it's important that it's about helping others. Like, I want to become better because I want to look back 10 years saying, Kevin, you're become a better teacher, better leader, better instructor, but rather than, oh, you're just a better Kevin, because you can only get better because you want to help others and serve others to get better. So I think it's important, like, how we, as you said, dealing with others, handling others, networking, relationship, all this, all come together. So is there a book that you recommend to the audience that have helped you or guided you?
I get asked this question a lot, and we've all read so many books, and difficult to pinpoint one book. But if I had to reflect on one book, and I say this probably more often than not, is that Malcolm Gladwell had a book called The Tipping Point, and I see that book nowadays, be applied in so many different aspects. Again, if you look here in Hong Kong, so many aspects that the tipping point on how people made certain decisions. How Hong Kong went through COVID, right? Decisions that were made. Some, looking back, were the right decisions. Hopefully, some looking back, maybe were not necessarily the right decisions, and so forth and so on. So I think, in all aspects of life, at some point, there is some aspect that will change the way that you look at things, all right, and the decisions that you make. And I think, if anything, hopefully we'll look back at that. What was the tipping point that made you do such and such, make you start a business, or what happened when you failed, right? What did you do, right? Or when you succeeded, okay? So all of these things is that personal reflection, but looking at something. And I do really believe nowadays, especially, sorry to bring in the geopolitical aspects, there are tipping points in all these things. I don't think people who are in position of authority really understand that. But I think if, instead of looking at, I call it the trees, but you look at the forest, you take a step back and look at the situation on some of these geopolitical issues, it is very stark to see what the decisions that people have made, all right? And again, in the heat of the moment, people do, unfortunately, I think, some silly things. And that if they do take a step back and really reflect on what that tipping point was, then maybe they will change course.
So it's a perspective, right? Like, you always, like for me, I always take the positive side of things. It doesn't matter what happened to me, or because a lot of things you're outside of control, you can accept, but you always want to look at the positive side, because there's no point looking at the negative side. There's no downside if you take a positive side. So
no, absolutely. I mean, as I said before, I look at the cup as always half full, half empty. A lot of people are very cynical, and you always have cynics. Okay,
you always have haters, cynics. Right.
Exactly. The naysayers,
yes,
okay,
yes.
And so forth. And the naysayers will say, oh, you're just a cheerleader, just, whatever you say, rah, 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 rah. But I think if you do it in a way that, is measured and makes sense, okay, not just follow along and just cheerlead, I think, it'll put those naysayers, to rest, and, they won't have much to say. So I was going to say, I commend you for having this, this,
thank you.
The show, this, I think you said this is the 10th episode. I hope you have, hundreds of episodes.
Yes, that's my goal.
Speaking to all kinds of individuals, and people will, hopefully listen and learn, from these experiences, because at the end of the day, this interaction, this one-on-one, face-to-face meeting is, I think, what it's all about.
Thank you, Leland. You took us from banking's ordinary world to the dark night and all the way back to purpose. You reminded us that the real definition of success is not how high you climb, but how many people you refuse to leave behind. Thank you for being my guest, and to every young entrepreneur listening, your talisman is already in your hand. Go cross your threshold.
Thank you so much.
Leland.
Thank you much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.